move to our last panel session here. And we got about 30 minutes before the end of the official hour and a half. So Ron, we've got plenty of time to probably address this. But this is something that I know you've got a lot of background on, Ron, and you know the relevance of this. And this is something with regards to the CMMC certification requirements that have been sort of emerging over the last several years and kind of putting a lot of small companies in binds, asking questions, getting tired of hearing about it, the goalposts getting moved again down the road. But this is something that's coming to fruition very soon. And I know you guys, as far as the CMMC certification requirements and the cybersecurity compliance, all these things that are a challenge, and particularly for small companies that don't have a lot of money to pay for all these services. Talk about what this solution is doing, where what you're trying to develop here, and maybe some of the key questions companies have to ask themselves on where they are and where this could be a fit for them.
Okay. Well, I think this topic is an interesting one, and in terms of just a little bit of a confession to make. I not only have a software company that's actually building the OneLink product, but I also, with a partner, have a small cybersecurity company as well. And my partner is actually the cybersecurity architect for the National Nuclear Security Agency. So we have some background in this cyber area as well. When I started to really hear about the requirements that the government was going to impose on small businesses around, each of them having some capability and being able to meet, this requirement, my sort of immediate reaction was, wow, it's needed. I understand the risk. It's needed because the government is spending an awful lot of money, and they just don't want some foreign country or some bad actors outside of in this country to be able to go and exploit all of that. And so I really understood the need for it. I think the thing that I was a little bit perplexed by is, how was the government actually going to get a small business to understand security requirements and then get them to be able to, do it in a way that they could create a manageable budget to be able to, to execute on it, and then be able to do it in a time frame where they had to do that and do all the other things that they have to do to be compliant as a government contractor. And so what I've tried to do is to say, hey, is there a way that we could provide some solution that would make this a lot more transparent to small businesses in terms of what they have to do? Could we give them a technical assist? Meaning, could we create some templates, or could we create some solutions that would then help them be able to address this requirement? Could we give them the ability to make it a little bit more understandable in terms of what they had to do and how much it was going to cost them to do it? And so what we did is took kind of a step back. A group of us kind of got together over a breakfast one morning and started to whiteboard and brainstorm. And so we came up with some tooling. And that's really what I want to talk about in this session. And so, in doing that, Robert, I have to give a shout out again to CIT, because once we were done and kind of had a kind of a well-formed kind of idea of what that tooling was like, we actually put a grant request together and submitted it to CIT to get some funding. And we were lucky enough to get CIT to help, support us. and building this tool. Robert, if we could just go to the next slide, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what it is and kind of our view. And this came from sort of a whiteboard session that myself and some security people kind of had. If you look at the problem around achieving CMMC, a certain level of CMMC compliance, the way we sort of describe this is there are a set of security controls that you have to be able to demonstrate to the government that you are meeting. And in meeting those controls, there is a set of policies that you need. Some of the controls are related around policies and what are you doing around that. And then some of the controls are related around just technically, how have you built your infrastructure? And have you built your infrastructure in such a way that you can meet some of the things that the government is asking for? And so we took an early look at the controls when we were building OneLink. And we said, let's be very mindful while we're building OneLink to make sure that we can address as many of the controls that the government is asking for as we can. So we did that. We made sure that we could address a good number of them, but that still didn't allow us to be able to say to a small business that was confronted with trying to get to a CMMC capability, kind of how are they going to do it? And so what we decided to do was take some of the tooling that we already had developed in the OneLink platform, like the workflow, the document management, and the project management capability, and really build out just a few more components that would give us a sort of an end-to-end security, capability. And so this diagram really kind of describes where we got and what we're offering. And so think about it from the standpoint of there are a set of requirements that you have to meet to be able to say that you have a CMMC capability. Those requirements are defined in a document published by the government, typically a NIST standard. There's a whole series of NIST standards around, think about it as the 800 series. They define all the controls and things that you have to do in order to be able to be, compliant. And so what we wanted to do is really build a tool that would give you the ability to be able to build out a model. And that model would then be oriented towards, meeting one of the NIST, controls. And obviously, CMMC is one of many. And so what we wanted to do is to be able to make sure that we could meet, that requirement. We also wanted to be able to leverage the tools that we already had in our platform to be able to store the evidence and to be able to give you policies that would kind of accelerate your ability to be able to, meet compliance. So we brought those things together. And then we said, okay, how do we now leverage the workflow? And the way we approach that is you can build a security plan. You can then build an assessment, template electronically in our system. And then we use our workflow to actually integrate all of the actors who may have to help you get to a final certification. And so who are those actors? Those actors become people in your company who may have be involved in helping you do a compliance assessment. And so typically we call that, kind of doing your own self-assessment, kind of going in and looking to see, okay, how are we doing against these controls? And then being able to score yourself. And then invariably you might have issues that you don't meet or things that you have to address. And so typically you have people who act as the remediators, and they're gonna say, hey, the requirement is this, you're not quite meeting it. here's what you need to do in changing, your environment to be able to do that. And so we wanted to bring the ability to bring the remediators into this. And then obviously at the end of the day, when you're done, the requirements say that you have to have an independent certifier. And so if you think about getting all the way through the finish line, at some point in time, you've got these three roles that are going to interact with one another. And so what we do is we allow you to be able to build that assessment, then be able to identify what are the remediation actions that are required. And then from there, you're generating your poem. But rather than having sort of a static document, we already had a fairly robust project management tool in our system. And so what we wanted to do is to leverage that tool to now give you the ability to have an executable project, and then being able to tie that together through some dashboards. So that's what we've built. What it does is it really allows you to be able to see the entire end-to-end of getting from, you're assessing yourself all the way through the finish line. And oh, by the way, if you are on our platform, we're going to give you an assist, because we're going to tell you that more than 85% of the controls we have implemented, and you get to inherit, our ability to, for those controls when you get to do the assessment. So let's move to the next chart. And I just want to show just a few screenshots in terms of what this looks like. And so one of the requirements is for you to build a security plan. And so what we've done here is given you a really, really simple, easy to use way for each of the controls to be able to determine and input how you are doing relative to implementing those, or what your plan is to implement those controls. And so we start with a plan that's easy to build. This one simple UI gives us the ability to do that. Robert, go to the next slide. And then obviously what we want to be able to do is once we have the plan, we now want to be able to actually conduct an assessment. And so we have another very simple UI that allows us to be able to go in at any point in time, see how we're doing relative to, implementing, all the controls that are required. This getting all the way to a level 3 certification is no easy task. And so many of you who may be in the IT space may require that. You might start to see, shortly contracts that come out with that requirement. I think many of you, though, aren't going to probably have to go that far. You're going to probably have to do the level 1, certification, which is going to be a little bit more manageable. But either way, we can give you the ability to number one, if you're on our platform, to be able to meet many of the controls. So we'll get you probably 85% there. And then we're going to give you some tools to help you be able to see exactly, kind of where you are in addressing the 15% that we don't meet. Let's go to the last chart. And so what I wanted to be able to show is just a screenshot of what some of our project management tools look like as well. So once you've done the assessment, we generate remediation actions. We then take those remediation actions and turn them into a real project plan that then allow you to be able to track and manage, how well you're doing in terms of, getting yourself to the finish line. And meanwhile, we're organizing all the documents and all the evidence that is required. So at the end of the day, when you are ready, when you bring the certifier in, you've got everything nice and organized and ready for them to go. So I know we kind of sort of covered a lot, Robert, in terms of what this is. and how it works. But I think the bottom line is it's going to significantly reduce the time. It's going to significantly reduce the costs, and it's going to make it a lot more visible into what you need to do to get to the finish line.
How long does it take a company to implement some of your
It depends on the starting point. If you look at, can you just go back one slide? So if you look at the security controls, so something like AC, that's access control. So there are about 25 to 28 requirements just in access control, right? And so depending on where you are, you might have a good starting point in terms of implementing them, and you don't have much work to do. But there could be a case where you don't have very many of them implemented, and so there's a lot of work to be done. Things like physical security, you could already have many of the practices implemented in those areas, and so you don't have much work to do. But again, that it's hard to give you a one answer to that, because it really depends on the starting point that the company is at. Now, Robert, there's a really neat thing in the requirements, and that is that if a company has a service provider and the service provider meets the control, the company can inherit that from the service provider. And so what I want to do with the OneLink platform is try to meet as many of the controls as I can, so that there's less work to be done by the company. And then so when we go through and we kind of look at, well, how do we stack up relative to the, let's say, a level 3 certification where there's 130 controls, we meet 92% of the controls. And so there is work for you to do, but it's a lot less than if you had to meet 130 by yourself.
What's the status of these? When I know they kind of kick things back a little bit, but where does it stand now in like the immediacy of people? If you haven't started looking at this yet, where have they announced a new approximate target deadline for this stuff?
So I know that they had said, that it was going to be in the June timeframe of this year, like second, third quarter of this year. I don't think we've seen any procurements come out or any hard requirements come out where they're gonna make that timeline. There's been some talk recently about pushing this into the third or fourth quarter of 2022. But here's my take on this. Just like there's some basics that you have to do to be a government contractor around, accounting and indirect rates. If you are the company, if you are the small business that is associated with a security breach, meaning the government gave you some data and that data got into the wrong people's hands, you're done as a government contractor. You might as well go find another line of work. And so there is going to be just some basic hygiene that you have to do in order to really be a responsible government contractor. And so let's take certification, kind of off the table. I think some of the work that you've got to do in being able to do, like, let's say, the basic hygiene stuff, the level 1 stuff, you need to get on with and just recognize that you just got to get that behind you.
Well, come sometime next year, like you said, you're going to be looking at an opportunity. It's going to say, level 1 certification required to bid
That's
on
right.
it. And if you don't have it, wow, now you have to get it, and there's probably a bigger line to step into as far as getting those certifications, to companies that will help, like you guys. I'm sure you'll get an uptick in business then, but do it sooner than later, because it's not going away. And to your point, you should be doing some of this anyhow. There's always that level. It's like there's always going to be some threat that you can't plan for. But man, if you get hit by something like a cyber attack, or or someone loses data or sends it out in the wrong way, because you didn't have the right controls, right? That's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing. That's going to be a hard thing to recover from.
Right, with or without this requirement that they're going to. But so keep it as these are good targets to follow, and be even better if you can, right?
Yeah.
Shirley, I see you came back online. Is there some thoughts you had on this?
Well, I was going to talk to Ron about this, and especially since so many of the HUBZone firms are small, and this is a critical area that we're going to be facing within the next few years for sure. What is your thoughts and your vision around helping the small businesses understand what's behind this, and how this tool from an individual company basis you could support? Will you be looking at a managed service for that to help them around these lines as well?
Yeah, so I think it's really threefold, Shirley. I think number one, it's the awareness of how important this is. So I sort of see, if you look at the webinar series that we built, it's really more around understanding how to be a government contractor,
Right.
understanding rates,
Accounting and finance, yeah.
and accounting and finance. I sort of see doing kind of a similar thing around the security. It's the OSD document is 535 pages of security controls. I don't know anybody who can read that and understand it if you're not a practitioner in the
Right.
Yawn fest.
And so part of it will be just to make people aware that there's a lot of detail and minutia in those documents, but you got to understand what it means to you and what it is that you need to do. So I think there's some pieces of that. There's also the whole notion of how do you build your infrastructure? How do you build kind of the back office of your company in a way that you can ultimately be compliant without going broke? Because you could spend a lot of money and a lot of time in this area. And so the thing that I want to be able to do there is really build out, kind of the platform, and be able to build out policies and standard solutions so that, we sort of can become a resource that small businesses can tap into. And then that allows them to really kind of lower their costs, because they're not off trying to reinvent the wheel every time, somebody says you got to meet this control or that control. And then the third part of this is the piece that I'm really talking about now, and that is, how do we get you through, the very beginnings of this to a place where you can claim that you are compliant, and that you can have an independent auditor come in and actually validate that you are. For me, the tooling is all about, how do we get you organized? How do we make sure that the evidence is collected in a repository? How do we make sure that there's a workflow, built around, taking you through that process so that it can be done efficiently? Because I am starting to work with small businesses in this area, and I'm seeing what some of them are doing. And quite frankly, some of them are spending way too much money and time in this area. And so I think just some consistent tooling can help. And that's really what I'm focused on. This is a little different in the sense that what I am also doing is I'm pulling together a consortium of other cybersecurity companies. So it's not just at work. I'm building 3 or 4, half a dozen other companies And we're all sort of contributing to the knowledge base, and we're all contributing to the workflow so that we know we have something that's really going to be helpful to small businesses.
Ron, is it going to be required that you be on the at-work system to deal with this module?
No, we're gonna pull this out and make this a separate module over time. No, Shirley, the way we built this, since you know our tooling, the way we built this is there is an assessment component that I talked about in that diagram, and these screens are coming from they're in that module. But what we want to ultimately do is, once you get to the remediation and you now have identified where your gaps are, we want to leverage our project tools, we want to leverage our timesheet, and we want to leverage our expense tools so that you can treat it like a real project and actually execute it.
Okay.
Ron, if someone's going through this certification module you have here, is that an ongoing recurring expense they would have to work with you monthly on this? And if so, obviously that's an allowable cost when you're bidding into a contract. These systems that are in place that the government wants to see in place, they are allowable costs, correct?
Yes. So right now, the way the regs, and this could change, but the way the regs are written, you define the system that that you're getting certified, and in most people it's going to be their back office, right, that they're taking through this certification. You get yourself organized, you do the work, and then you've got to bring in an independent certifier to kind of look at whether they agree with you in terms of the what you're claiming. You have to do that every 3 years. And so you've got to get sort of recertified. There is a threat assessment component, meaning you're looking at what for the business that you're in, what security threats that are out there, and you've got to do that every year because that's part of being, a compliant company. And so what I intend to do is to give companies, a module that they basically can do both components and do it really economically from the standpoint of just a small annual subscription fee. And then they have the ability to look year over year. Here's our repository. Here's all of our evidence. They don't have to go back up and look, through their file cabinets. It's all nice and organized for them. And then year over year, they can continue to refresh it. That's the whole idea behind the tooling, to kind of add efficiency to how they going to do this. Because you could, if you're not careful, and what I see lots of small businesses doing is spending way too much money in this area.
Yeah. Well, there's been, it's sort of the scary, numbers put out there. It's going to $20,000 for certain certifications, and I
was just talking to a business the other day that had spent 50, and they so I said, well, let me see your assessment. They were less than halfway done. So they just aren't big enough. They just weren't big enough. They weren't. It's one thing if you're doing millions and millions of dollars of revenue and you spend that kind of money, but this business was like doing 3 million.
Yeah. It's a little costly. Someone asked, a question came through, is there a checklist put together based on your experience on level 1 CMMC?
There is, and the tool actually gives you the checklist. So you pick a, say you want to do CMMC and you want to do level 1, it will only show you the controls that are relevant to level 1. And so that serves as your checklist. If you pick level 3, it'll only show you the controls that are level 3. Well, obviously the water gets deeper when you're level 3. Level 1, there's probably 5 or 6 main controls that you have to meet.
Well, any closing comments. If there's any other questions, you can send them in and we'll try to relay them as quickly as we can. Currently, there's no other questions that have come in the board. There's one that came in. Did I understand it correctly that you are looking to partner with other businesses that are CMMC certified to provide a resource to small businesses?
I sure am. So go to the website, get a hold of us, contact Victor, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. Because what I want to be able to do is provide the tooling to kind of facilitate, being able to do this and keep it organized. But as you start to do the assessments and you look at what the remediation actions are, there is a ton of work for other cyber companies to help small businesses do that efficiently. My only claim is, if you're going to work with me, you're going to have to be efficient. We don't want to rip small businesses off. And I just see some bad practices out there right now in the market, in terms of small businesses paying a whole lot more than they should be paying to get through this process.
Well, it's also that you get to become a deer caught in headlights when you get to see these what people are paying. You're like, there's almost inaction at that point, because I can't do it. Let's just wait. And then you become that person at the end when you can't wait and you have to do something. And
you can get through this. And I just say to everybody out there, you ought to think about this. Forget certification. I mean, set that aside for now. Just kind of look at what it is that you really need to be doing security-wise to be a responsible government contractor, because it's not something you can ignore. And my thinking is, when you start to do that, then you're going to probably look at level 1 and say, yeah, I ought to be headed down that path anyway. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I do want to, follow up on this whole entire thing to let you know about my experience with working with Ron and AtWorks and their whole entire team there, is that they're very agile. When something comes up, they're quick to address it. Even if your company, even if you're on their platforms and your company has a unique type of scenario that you want to make sure that the system accommodates, they're very actively listening. They make adjustments where they can, and it's very in a timely manner. It's Ron and his team have been phenomenal to work through this whole entire process. And this CMMC module here is just one example. The issue started coming up, and he immediately started saying, okay, how is this going to affect the small businesses? What can we do to help them out and to help them understand this process? So, I mean, they're coming from a framework and a mindset of making sure that we're not only educated about it, but that we have the tools in order to address these issues as well in a cost-effective manner, which is extremely important.
Yeah. Thanks, Shirley.
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and close the panel out in the session. I want to thank everybody for attending today. Michelle, if you have any other comments, if you're online, or helping close this out, but if anybody has any final comments, we're a little past the original 2:30 hour, but I know we had a little extra time added on anyhow, but I know folks probably have things to do this Friday afternoon. And thanks for the opportunity to manage the panel. I really appreciate it.
No, and that was great. Thank you so much to everybody that participated in today's panel. I mean, this was absolutely wonderful. You guys covered a lot of key topics, and also not only did you address the issues, but a potential solution. So that's awesome. So if anybody has any other questions, feel free to shoot an email. We will be sharing the registered participants with the panelists. So in case with follow-up, they'll be able to reach out. As I mentioned, the recording will be posted in the virtual summit agenda, which kind of itemizes all the presentations that we have. And we do still have some more presentations to come, but we're getting close to the end of that month, which is, kind of a bittersweet for me because I'm a little bit sleepy.
Victor, can you put up a slide for how to contact you? And
yes, if you bring it up, Robert,
There we go.
There we go.
By the way, you could always go to our website www.atworksys.com, but please give me an email directly. And then those of you who have access to the JAMA system, it'll be in there, the PowerPoint presentation. And for others, again, contact me and I'll get it to them.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much. Please,
Anything
nobody
else,
ever
Ron?
contacts me about accounting questions. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to give any help. Without further ado,
Well, guys, I'd say Shirley is your resource.
Exactly.
For
Yeah, I will
accounting
100% forward your
Shirley
email
is
to
your
her, who
resource.
then will send it to AtWorks. I won't even touch it. I'll just be like, no.
All right.
So thank you
Thank you.
guys.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Michelle. Good luck to the HUBZone folks. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.